Okay, so this is our panel. You already know who's who: Ime, Rene, Freerk, and Martijn. And I'm starting my little moderation with a confession. And the confession is, I was actually hoping to have even more people in the room that are not coming from the Netherlands. Yeah. So I think if we make a little poll here, how many non-Dutch people are in the room? Raise a hand. Okay, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. But I think I have a general feeling that the non-Dutch investors and corporates underestimate the Dutch startup scene. And I want to find out how you analyze the strengths and the weaknesses of your home country and the founders in the Netherlands, and what people should become aware of it and learn about it. Ime, what do you think?
Cool. So those people who were not from Holland, were they entrepreneurs mostly, I think? So not necessarily, so yeah. What do I think of that? I think in general, looking throughout the whole day, I was quite positive about seeing all the presentations from the teams, coming from Yes Delft, coming from Rockstart, and there's a lot going on, let's say, starting in terms of entrepreneurs. I can't complain about what I see there, also in respect to the other countries that I visit, so I don't necessarily think that that's where, if there's a problem, that is where the problem is. It is surprising that if I look at other events, there are definitely more investors and corporates as potential partners in the audience attending those events compared to what we've seen here today. I don't necessarily know what the reason for that is, so maybe one of these guys has a good answer. I do. Maybe a little bit on the side. Something that struck me from this morning was Christophe EV Box's presentation, and he started with, let's say, the unfair advantage he had by starting his company in Holland. In this case, an electric vehicle, charging service provider. And the reason he had an unfair advantage is because we had certain regulatory push in this particular industry in Holland, that if you look at the industry as a whole, is leading almost any other country in Europe. And then I was thinking of all the startups that I've worked with, that I've been invested in by now in multiple countries. There's quite a number of them that have become where they are today because in their specific market where they started, there was some sort of well, I wouldn't say regulatory push. I wouldn't say that that's the only reason, but at least it was a driver for their start and the fact that they are further along than some of the other companies that operate in similar industries but haven't started in that particular market with that regulatory push. So it's something that I found interesting this morning. I'm not sure, maybe we have too little of those industries or regulatory pushes that allow this ecosystem to grow faster compared to some of the other countries, but I know EV definitely is one example of where it works out well. Yeah. That's just some thoughts that I had.
Rene, how do you analyze the Dutch founder scene and comparing them with the quality and the traction you see in other countries, even bigger markets?
No, I think what Ime says is totally right. We have a small country in the Netherlands, and therefore our market is limited compared to some other European countries where we look at startup communities. So that is a disadvantage that we have. There where support from the government is in certain sectors, like in the EV side, you see that we excel, that we're actually leading the world in the developments there. And from an investor's perspective, I think it's pretty clear that if you go to Germany, where the energy went, where the transition has happened, but now the bottlenecks in the energy sector itself are attacked by startup companies. That is where the great opportunities are. So I think that if you are a European investor, most likely you're not looking at the Netherlands per se first to come out here. You have a lot to cover in your own country as such. That doesn't mean that the startups that we have, particularly also seen today from the Netherlands, are not potentially successful European players. But it will take a little bit, and we have to accelerate. My biggest worry is that we see great initiatives that are just going to be a little too late to come to the real game, and that's something we have to fix, I guess.
One other short observation, if you look at the investment you announced today, the last one we announced, the one I will be announcing on Thursday, they're all German. But I've also been involved in Rockstart for 4 years, and we've never been able to attract a German startup to that particular program. So it's just an observation, but it might say something. Yeah.
Well, I think the strength of the home market is an important point. For electric mobility, there has been a strong market here in the Netherlands, but for energy efficiency and energy solutions in general, I think it's too small and too not strong enough. Also in a steady, robust policy framework. On top of that, I do think that the Dutch tend to look to other countries easily. And you can also see it from the presentations from today. They look around in Europe. They think, well, we're used to doing business in other geographies. We know our languages a little bit. So we go out to the country where we see the best fit. So they tend to fly out a little bit.
But investors don't flock in. That's basically the point here. There's not all kinds of investors from other countries that look at these international startups from the Netherlands to invest in. And that is a little bit of a contradictory that we have to
Martijn, what made you come back to the Netherlands to start Black Bear from here rather than doing it in the US, where you have been living before and you had some success over there and you know the game they play in terms of venture capital and the startup ambition? Why did you come back to this beautiful country?
Family reasons, of course, right?
Yeah. Well, mostly the rain. Yeah. No, actually, it's an interesting story, and I think I can relate to the points that were made before about context matters, which is one of the ventures we did over there was interactive TV, and that was quite successful with a good exit, and then I came back and decided, okay, that's something I know a lot about, so let's do interactive TV here, and it failed completely, and I mean. Part of it is, of course, it's a very different market. You have maybe sort of 5 TV channels as opposed to 500, but also a lot of culture elements. So sort of, being arrogant and talking Dutch with an American accent doesn't help either. And there's sort of a few other things that sort of led to the failures. So maybe one other comment I find to add to the conversation, I think what will be key for us, which I think is a little harder to do in a lot of the sort of clean tech energy spaces, is how actually you can leverage your home market and quickly expand outside of it. Because I think if you look at, it seems to me that there's a lot of national players doing sort of the same thing and staying in their home countries for quite a bit. And as Dutch, if we would play that game, we'll end up always losing against France and Germany. So I think in terms of the approaches we take and the sectors we focus on, I think we should sort of look for things that travel well within the clean tech space. So I mean, it was one of the reasons sort of that I was attracted to the Black Bear opportunity, because it's tires are tires and they're all the same, and sort of the way the industry works is quite similar. And the regulatory frameworks are quite similar, so it's actually easily travels. And I think that's sort of maybe investment consideration, that you're sort of targeting the Netherlands market, but in fact, you can easily export that elsewhere.
You clearly identified a global problem, and probably many national markets that are quite similar. But this is not the case in energy by definition, and I think it's a more country-by-country approach, and that probably is slowing down many players, right?
Well, then you really have to think about, should I start here, right? Because then you're naturally at a disadvantage because of your smaller market size.
Unless there's a really interesting regulatory push like in EV, then it makes sense. But then, I think it's a little bit of a different discussion. But again, taking the example of EV Box, they are in a market where everybody understands and sees that it's going to grow really, really fast all over the world. They have a leading advantage in terms of product development, their largest install base worldwide, and they're selling out right before it gets interesting, to a French company. So, and that is maybe also a little bit symptomatic, I know from my personal history, but not laughing, Martijn.
So that's a perfect time.
So maybe that has also something to do with the difference between what we see happening even in Scandinavia or in Germany or in the UK, where we've had more companies that went through it also when when it got really interesting.
Are the Dutch founders selling their startups to an acquirer too quickly? Too often?
Absolutely. And I don't, some reasons. I had a long conversation last week with Kees Kolen, the founder, CEO of Booking.com, and he always uses the example of how he had to sell the company at a valuation of 150 million, where now it's valued at 80 billion, because he couldn't find the funding to see it through at that particular phase of his company. And I don't know if that's the only reason, or whether it's also mentality or culture that, wow, that looks like a big number, 50 million, let's sell it, even though you can make a company that achieves 5 billion. Well, you've seen more of those kind of entrepreneurs in multiple countries. Maybe you have a perspective on that as well.
But access to capital is the issue to make a successful company, and obviously to create the highest valuations possible. And we are in a bad position comparably in Europe in general compared to the US, but I think even in the Netherlands worse than anywhere else in Europe. We always say there's always a lot of money. All entrepreneurs here, they have to scramble for the first 100,000, 200,000, the first million, 5 million, and then when they go out for 20, 25 million, you have to be very international to do that already. And I think that is the access to capital is what constrains actually the rollout of big companies, and therefore you sell out earlier than you afterwards might think of. Otherwise, if you don't raise the capital or not sell out, you might go bankrupt anyway. So it's always a hindsight view. It's access to capital. I think that's the biggest problem that we have.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. I think maybe the second one is, I think what you mentioned, Jan, if sort of the comparable exits all have been sort of, if you're in the, selling above 50 million to 100 million, you did a really good job, right? So that defines success. Whereas when I was on the West Coast, sort of, then you're a loser. So the role models, you do always, I think people benchmark each other and entrepreneurs watch each other. So I think that also plays into it, whether you sort of perceive an exit to be success or a failure.
And it has another indirect impact as well on the ecosystem in general. Not having these exits at a certain valuation also makes sure that the money goes somewhere else than in this ecosystem. If you look again, like Stockholm, Sweden, a smaller country, they have a couple of companies that saw it through to a much higher valuation. And then if you look what happens to the complete entrepreneurial system across sectors, is very impactful, and we have not seen enough of that here.
Yeah.
And you have a couple of Dutch companies in your corporate VC portfolio. Rene, you have a couple of Dutch ones in your portfolio. Rockstart has a couple of Dutch ones. Do you think they have all it needs for them to make nice big exits, or do you think there is whatever limitation? Could be the exit or the lack of capital limitation, or maybe a cultural limitation, which may be even something that we can still change. Who knows?
I think it counts for all companies in our portfolio. In our view, they all have a chance to become very successful. There's no guarantees, so I'll put that out straight.
That's not what you tell your LPs, right?
Also, but they want us to tell that because sometimes they think we are too optimistic. So no, but for seriously, that's always the premise that why we invest, that we think they're going to be successful. To me, it's all about, we look at a couple of risks. The biggest risks that I see in the startup companies that we invest in is, on one hand, is the team able to execute in an accelerating growth stage? That's very tricky, very difficult. And the other one is, do we have enough access to capital to fund that and to make sure that we can fund the company properly? And those risks, will only emerge in the years to come. And we have to solve them at that time. But I obviously have good hope that we can do that. Yeah. Therefore, we also, one more thing, we always invest also together with other VCs in the same company, just to have enough dry powder available to support companies, not only when they do well, but particularly also when they do not too well, that you don't have to sell out easily. So that's the way we mitigate that.
Well, I do think, though, that there's also a mentality issue. Like Martijn already indicated, being really successful and being bigger than anyone else doesn't fit very well with the Dutch culture in general. It's like you can be a bit crazy, you can be a bit different, but being immensely different and arrogant doesn't go with the general culture. So.
Are the Dutch too modest?
Yeah, in a sense.
I've met many not so modest Dutch people, to be honest.
That's just words, not actions.
In actions, yeah.
Well, I have to say, just anecdotally, I was visiting a company last week, and it's a very early stage company, and they had a chart on there on what they wanted to have as investment money, but on the top of that, they also had the valuations they expected to represent. 2023, they're going to be worth 10 billion. 10 billion. So I've never seen a slide like that. It was a Dutch company. I think that the ambitions are creeping slowly in here. And then I thought, what the hell are you talking about? But, and actually that ambition level is good to have. We should support that. And instead of just saying, well, these guys are lunatics. But it's rare.
It's rare.
Yeah. No, I also see that as like one of the things. I think Ime has done it as well, being sort of coaching and mentoring at the Yes Delft program, sort of a volunteer side thing, and you do see quite a bit of companies that sort of I think have pretty sort of well fundable things, and then they're spending a year to raise 200K, right? And I'm like, you cannot sort of even develop a proper project that should be 2 million. You're already starting to underfund your thing from the get-go. And by definition, then you're giving up a considerable portion you'll give up. And then, just so the whole thing is basically screwed up from the beginning. And I think that's sort of, I think we're sort of Yes Delft and Rockstart and can give a lot of guidance to sort of raise the bar and, either go for it or go bust, but not like this in-between thing, because it just kills you.
True.
Which companies do you think are going to be the stars of the future? Yeah, made in the Netherlands. He volunteers.
That's easy.
We agree, because he seems to be above the cloud already. Okay, but the other ones, who are the other ones that probably can stay independent long enough to really make many investors happy and to enter many markets? Who has got potential here in the Netherlands? Who should these guys be watching?
Rene? Oh my God.
Investment advice.
Oh, so not talking about our own portfolios, I would assume, right? So, yeah.
It could include your portfolio too, to make it a little bit easier. But be honest.
Yeah, Well, if I'm honest, then you have to look at the characteristic of a startup that is really disruptive. If it's a Me Too company that does it just a little bit better than the rest, they will create value. There's nothing wrong about it, but not in the stars that you look at. So then I'll take a company out of our portfolio that I think is on that path, because it's really disrupting a complete value chain, and it looks Excel. It's not in the energy sector, so I can say it also because nobody is offended here. But it's a company that is really disrupting the eyewear industry in a tremendous way, making it greener, but also making it more effective. There was just an article on from iPhone that the next disruption in Apple will be all about virtual reality. So the glasses that need integrated LCDs. This is what these guys can print. Just with the 3D printers that they have. So I think that is the disruption that we need. And Lux Excel is a company that I think in a couple of years we will talk about here at this conference as being a great success.
So being super disruptive helps if you want to make it big.
You have to be disruptive. You have to have the attitude in the management team, and obviously, again, the access to the capital to grow to be disruptive. And that is very difficult to do, but it's possible.
Any company comes to your mind?
A few, but allow me please to indicate that I think there might be surprises in the circular energy or the circular economy domain. I think the atmosphere here in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, for circular economy initiatives is quite attractive. And it could be a similarly attractive growth market as the electric mobility market is. We've seen a few today that I'm impressed by, and I see a lot of opportunity for. So if I would have to put my bets, I would look for something in the circular economy domain.
And a particular company comes to your mind already?
I really love to see what GrowX is doing, bringing together circular economy, smart energy, but also the agricultural heritage that we have here in the Netherlands. So I expect a lot of them.
And Ime, any favorite that you have that we should be watching?
I do, but I'm not going to share. Yeah.
You keep it to yourself?
Yes.
Do you think that will help to make them big?
And, we'll see in time. I'll tell you later. Yeah.
So my personal answer is, if you want to create a big company, you have to collaborate. Yeah, you need to share information. You need to work together with a lot of smart people all over the world. Yeah, not only in your own country. And that is one of the reasons why we do Ecosummit, of course. Blah blah blah. Yeah, to bring together a lot of players from all over the continent who should be working together more. Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, super. Let's finish this panel. Let's thank you very much for joining it. I think the Netherlands is active. Yeah, a lot of good startups are being made, but we still need a few more big success stories, and we are working hard together on making it happen. Now it's time for two things. A big round of applause for the panelists.